He has experiences of managing a full information security technology portfolio and risk governance and financial investment banking, educational, and international institutions. He's managed multi-million-dollar budgets with the focus on delivering on-time budget results, providing maximum ROI and total cost ownership. In addition, as a certified information security manager, he's a believer in developing educational security risk programs that align with organization's strategic vision to maximize profitability and minimize the impact of risk, including cyber-related events. Today, Cicero is going to speak on strategic security alignment to the organization's strategy. So everyone, let's welcome Cicero to the stage.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much, Kim. I understand that I have competition here. I have competition. Well, it was not so much of a competition with the salad, maybe, but now that your main dish are coming out, and I hear maybe dessert might also be coming out, so I have competition here. But my name is Cicero Chimbanda. I will do my best to present to you something that maybe you've heard, maybe you've even spoke about it, have been involved in it, but I want to submit to you that the main point of my conversation this afternoon is about relationships. We don't usually talk about relationships when it comes to technology or cybersecurity, although we all know it's very important. But my topic will be really focused on me getting to know you, you getting to know me. And what I mean by that is not right now, but I mean that to be in the action plan that you will be implementing when you go back to your office. Meaning getting to know your stakeholders, your customers, your peers, and of course, those who you report to or communicate to. Strategic security, alignment to the organization's strategy. Well, like I said, let's get to know each other. We'll start off by me letting you know who I am. So you could probably tell by the name, Cicero Chimbanda. It is not originated, those of you from Chicago, the city of Cicero, or the I-50, those who drive on Cicero. That's not where my name came from. My name came actually from my dad, who's an avid reader, and he was reading about the philosopher or orator Cicero. He liked the book, and so he named me Cicero. I've been in the industry for a bit. Like Chris, I believe he said he started when he was 15 because he'd been doing it for 30 years or so. Well, I'm too look young too. So, but I started in the early 90s. I graduated from DePaul University. I was actually a student athlete. I played soccer. I was fortunate to have a athletic scholarship to go to the university, where I did my undergrad in bachelor's and master's in computer science and project management. The first 10 years of my career, I worked as a developer. Back then, COBOL, I don't know, any COBOL developers here? Okay, so that's where I got my bearing. Then C++, some SQL. But then I moved over to the administration side where I was managing email. Does anybody remember when RIM came out with the BlackBerry pager? Remember you used to get the real-time notifications? Black RIM, the news. Well, I introduced that to a utility company that I worked for in the 90s, a big utility company that we all know here. I actually brought that into to that company as a communications manager. But then I also went to do some international work. I was born outside the United States, lived a little bit in Europe. I'll talk a little bit more about that as you get to know me. But really my biggest, I would say, why or motivation of why I do what I do was when I made the shift to go do some international work. back in the country where I was born, okay? Or a continent, I should say. I went to South Africa, got a chance to be in Mozambique, Gabon, and even did some work in Brazil. My first language is Portuguese, so if you hear me saying some words that you don't understand, it's because that's my first language, Portuguese. But nevertheless, I did that, but then I came back, and I remember I talked to a mentor, and I said to him, he was the president of the company that I was working for, said, I want to shift from being a, vertical, stream down subject matter expert, which I was at the time, to more of a manager, business, acumen. And he said, you want to do one of three things. One, MBA, if you want to go and get your MBA, or a financial acumen, or legal, okay? And I wanted to get my legal degree, but I got married that year, so that didn't work out too well, so I had to choose my battles. But I did go into a financial planning mindset. I actually got my Series 6, 63, Series 7, where I was actually had the ability to consult on financial products. Well, this lasted till 2008. Does anybody know what happened in 2008? Yeah, we all know about 2008, right? The market crashed, right? So I had to make a shift. I got back into what I knew best, which was technology, but it really propelled me to be ready to work in a financial atmosphere using IT and cybersecurity acumen. So I worked for JP Morgan Chase, Northern Trust, and I worked in their new business initiatives as a project manager. But then subsequently, I knew that, cybersecurity in 2010 was really becoming not just a good to have in the IT department or a topic in the risk department, but it needed to be developed as a full-fledged initiative. And so that's when I started to focus on cybersecurity, 2010. I got my CHISM 2014, and I've been working in that space since then. So that's a little bit about me. A little bit more about me, and I say this to say this puts context in what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to focus on three main principles in my topic. One word, it's going to be easy to remember. It's a framework that I actually developed and I taught it. I teach at a higher education as well. And I think you'll be able to walk away with some practicals and some ideas on how to be able to implement some best practices so you can yield some immediate returns when you get back in your office. But this puts a little context on who I am. These 4 dates, 1975, 1995, 2009, and 2025. My dad was a military guy, born in Angola, but he worked for the Portuguese military in Angola. In 1975 was when Angola got its independence from Portugal. Immediately right after that, they chose a few capable men to study through the United Nations scholarship abroad. My dad was a recipient of that scholarship in 1975 to study at Georgetown University with the mindset to go back to Angola to lead back when he got his degree. He was studying in natural resources. Unfortunately, 1975, Civil War started, and so he couldn't go back. He had his family, 5 children with his wife, and so he had to figure out a way to bring the family to the United States. And fortunately, we were able to come and join him in 1975. He wrote a book during the pandemic called Enduring Hardships in Uncharted Territories. And that book talks about the diaspora, but also it talks about the Cold War during the 1970s, how Russia and United States were fighting proxy wars around the world, including Angola, which was one of the hotbeds of the war in 1970s. He talks a little bit about that in his book. 1995, Nelson Mandela. I got a chance, like I mentioned earlier, to do some international work, and I was fortunate enough to be in a room with Nelson Mandela. With the organization I work, we gave him an award. It was a Hope Award. But he says this: I never lose. I either win or I learn. This is a philosophy that I carry into my day-to-day, even today. Creating an atmosphere in my department that lessons learned is actually a good thing. The atmosphere that you can create where you can communicate and be transparent about what you've done, what you don't know, how you learn, because you never lose. You either win or you learn. 2009 was when I joined Loop Capital Markets, where I'm at right now. I've been working there. It's 15 years last year. I've been there for I started as a manager. Now I'm sitting in CISO, Senior Vice President. I sit on a portfolio of IT, reports to me, but also cyber risk reports to me. I chose to work at Loop Capital, which is an investment bank. It's a broker-dealer. We trade. We have an office in New York, office in Chicago, office in Miami, but we trade all over the United States and even international with the mindset of creating a risk-avert method of people yielding under investment. Jim Reynolds' philosophy, which I align to, says, I believe if you're in this earth, you're supposed to help others, especially if you are fortunate to have the same level of success. Jim Reynolds, actually, those of you who are from Chicago, he grew up in Inglewood. If you know anything about Chicago, it's one of the rougher neighborhoods in Chicago, but he has an incredible story. But again, I say this to say, one of the alignments of what you do to the business is being able to have relationships with the people that you're working with. Getting to know who they are, what they do, and why they do what they do. This right here is the mindset. These are 4 books that drive me. You might have other books. I always like to learn what other people read. God is My CEO is a phenomenal book. If you don't have to really be a Christian or religious. You could be agnostic, atheist, but it's really about the principles of leading an organization with a higher power or a higher entity in mind. God is My CEO. Phenomenal book. We all know that we lost one of our presidents, Jimmy Carter. He's a hero of mine. I love the mindset that he had. I know we're kind of in a polarized political arena here, but I think we can always learn, no matter what stripe, no matter what arena, what philosophy, where you were born, what language you speak first. You can always learn from people around you. Jimmy Carter, a phenomenal gentleman when he was in the White House, and then even post White House, and how he dedicated his life. And it's a great book. I actually have his book here. And then Strategic CIO by Phil Weinzer. And then another book that I just started to read, I read this over the holiday, is actually Fancy Bear by Scott Shapiro, which is a great book. If you've never read it, great book to read. It'll keep you, it talks about the different 5 major hacks in the last few years, and he fictionalizes it and gives you some great lessons learned. But these are some great books. I'm actually going to ask a question, and I have these 3 books, not God is My CEO, that one is a keeper. But I have the 3 other books. If you answer the question correctly, I'll give you one of the books. I'll let you choose. But then lastly, 2025. 2025 just happened. I just came back from a trip from Africa. I got back last week. It was 88 degrees. I was in Angola. And we did our trip also via Portugal. And the reason why we went there, you guys all have heard of the phenomena, brain drain, that happens in third world countries, where you have intellectual property that actually is not used in the country. A good example is my father, for example. He came to the United States with the option to go back, but because of circumstances, he couldn't go back. Not of his choice, but he just couldn't go back. Well, one of the things that we did in 2014, December to January 2025, we actually took some scholarships to some Angolan students that are studying, 2 of them in cybersecurity, and they are studying, or computer science, cybersecurity. They are studying to study there and apply the knowledge there so that they can help the country in the future. So this is what, those are some of the recipients. You can't really see the pictures. That's where Angola is in the map, if you're wondering where that is. Let's jump into my topic. You know a little bit about me. Now let's talk a little bit about the content of what I'm delivering here. Introduction to the STS model. What is the STS model? Well, the first one is security. You focus on how security is brought into your organization by understanding that there is what's called organization strategy. Your company, your organization, public, private, non-for-profit, has a strategy. Typically, that strategy is renewed annually, but you also have a long-term strategy. As a professional leader, you need to understand what that strategy, but as a cybersecurity professional, there is what we call the CIA triad that we need to make sure we're keeping that in mind. And so the strategy of security is that it results in what we call confidentiality. But then you have trust. What is trust? Trust is where you're thinking about your regulatory obligation, your systems, and you're aligning that to make sure you're bringing integrity into your organization. And then finally, the last S is stability. And we'll talk a little bit about that you don't have a seat at the table. No one cares what you're doing unless you are able to bring stability to your organization, or you at least align your plans. And that is where availability comes into play in the CIA triad. So you can start seeing the mapping or the aligning of cybersecurity to your organization strategy. Let's do a little bit of definition. One of the challenges that we have in our industry, I just mentioned to you, my first language is Portuguese. I literally spoke only Portuguese for the last month. And there's a different terminology. I speak French as well. When you try to define things in different languages, different terminologies, that's just language. But then you go into private, public, government, and then you have think tanks, you have academic, which I teach. And so you have many different definitions when it comes to what is cybersecurity, what is security. So let's, for the sake of this presentation, information security is the protection of information from threats, regardless of its form. This is from ISACA. The other one, cybersecurity, is the ability to protect, defend the use of cybersecurity from cyber attacks. Why do I say this? This is not for this audience. I know that this audience knows. But when you are talking to your peers that's sitting in the other suites, COO, CFO, your compliance, when you're talking to the business heads, you have to define for them what language you're speaking to them when you're presenting and when you're dialoguing. Assets and actors. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about cybersecurity or security. And when we're looking at assets, these are things that are valued, that your company owns, that you own and you're trying to protect. These are your assets. Data, in 2025, and when you look at your projections, some of your most valuable jewels right now that's being projected is your LLMs and your Gen I programs. Actors, obviously you have the different, we all know script kiddies, we know insiders, we know, the activists, we know nation state, APTs. But in 2025, it still says that nation state and your insiders are some of your top concerns. And I talked a little bit about proxy war from a kinetic standpoint, physical war where a country uses another country for war. Well, that happens. Proxy attacks are on a rise as we think about that. Literally, where you're seeing your public IP address coming from that's being attacked, that's not necessarily the attacker. They are coming from somewhere else. They are initiating origin from somewhere else, and you need to dig deep. And when we talk about CIA triad, everybody knows, again, confidentiality, integrity. This is what we're aligned and trying to protect. So as we talk about this model, right? I'm just going to collapse it all. Our goal as cybersecurity professionals is to minimize risk. How do we do this? Well, in the confidential space, you think about encryption, cipher, right? You want to make sure that you are protecting your data and you minimize risk. With integrity, identity access management, zero trust, right? You want to make sure we know who is on our network and giving them that AAA, access, the authority, authentication, the authority, and then accountability, AAA. And then availability, which is huge in our industry now that we are facing not just the ability of hackers being able to infiltrate or exfiltrate your data, but they're also able to disrupt your infrastructure and in some cases with health, affect physical health through certain attacks. The availability aspect of cybersecurity. And so you're minimizing risk and you're also maximizing or strengthening your posture by creating controls, by putting in controls. In the security space, we're going to talk a little bit about governance, right? The ability to have a top-down mindset, but not just a top-down mindset, but a contextual top-down mindset where you're aligned with your compliance. And you're also creating a resilient infrastructure with your stability. Now, I put before you this model that I created and I teach as cybersecurity professionals in your thinking of alignment. Your counterparts are not going to really focus our CIA triad. That's what we know. You and me, we're focused on security, but we are aligning that to organizational strategy. So confidentiality, security is focused on organization strategy. Then you have your integrity side of the equation where you're building trust. And we'll talk a little bit about that. How can we have zero trust, build trust, and bring what we call the adherence to your regulatory systems? And then lastly, that availability formula where availability plus stability brings what we call operational excellence. This is a formula, CIA plus STS, which is the model that I'm talking about, brings organizational strategy, gives you compliance to your regulatory systems, and then brings forth operational excellence. This is the language that the business units are looking for. And we'll create some dollars and cents at the end of this presentation. So, security. So, when we talk about organizational strategy, we first have to understand governance. What is governance? The set of responsibilities and practices exercised by the board with the goal of providing strategic direction, ensuring that objectives are achieved, ascertaining that risks are managed appropriately, and verifying that the enterprise's resources are used responsibly. This is from ISACA. we have to really, when we come into an organization, we have to understand what is the corporate governance that's surrounding the place that I work in, the industry that I work in. Now, this fits more into a publicly traded, mature model governance that I'm about to show you, which is different than a privately held, different than a non-profit, different than a government agency. But nevertheless, there are governance. In this one, you usually have your board, your committee, you have your laws, you have your hierarchy, you have your SOP, standard operating procedures, your policies, your procedures. These are things that needs to be in the mind of the individual that's responsible for aligning security to the organization's strategy. You start by looking at what is the vision, what's the mission, what's the goal, what's the strategy. Again, simple, we all know. But it needs to be in the forefront of our goals as we are approaching our goals to make sure we're aligning security to the organization strategy. Let's talk a little bit about leadership. I consider myself a developing, work-in-progress leader, always learning. I still have mentors, but I absolutely love to mentor. And a lot of times I learn a lot from the individuals that I mentor. And when I think about leadership, you got to put it in context. You know, some of us here are leading organizations that are 300 to 500 employees, or some less. Others are leading organizations that have 5,000 to 10,000. Others of you might be in organizations that are 15 plus thousand employees. And depending on your department, your budget, you can put in the number of employees that report to you. But I'm here to say that if you're working in an organization that's a smaller, then you need to put that in context to your strategy and medium size and large size. And there's maturity. There's a maturity life cycle. And I think you'll see this from a small beginning strategy. Typically, you'll have cybersecurity where it's within or embedded in IT. And usually you'll have little to no business visibility. And the salary is low. And, but you want to move your program, whether it's a large organization or a small organization, up this particular ladder of maturity. The second one is where you have a CIO or COO that actually is overseeing the cybersecurity. You're having a little bit of visibility, and usually the title of that leader is a VP or a senior. But then you want to go into a model where you are mature. You're having a visibility at your board. You're having a title like a CISO or ISSO. That's a governmental title. But that's the model you want to move to, and you can do that by demonstrating that your cybersecurity organization aligns itself to the organization's strategy. This is how we do it. Understanding what an executive management model looks like. This is what a CISO, typically the hierarchy or the development path of a CISO looks like. But I'm here to say, a chief information security, these are some of the skill sets that is published for 2025 that's looking at the development of a CISO, right? The ability to communicate, the skills to communicate, the ability to understand risk management. Chris talked a little bit about that. Brian, some of my previous speakers, and even some of my subsequent speakers will talk about risk, especially under or within AI. But we have to understand how to be able to take models, such as the framework of the 7S of risk. And there's several risk models out there. There's the leadership skills and business acumen, the ability to also be able to collaborate technically, because you don't get the respect or the the execution within your organization unless you're able to understand technology at a high level, but also practitionally. And then obviously right now we're talking about cloud security. So these are some of the skill sets that are written for 2025 that we have to constantly be growing and building on. I sit on a task force. It was actually initiated by myself and my compliance officer, where we said, okay, we don't necessarily have a large organization. We're about 300, 500 employees, depending on which business that you're looking at. We have subsidiaries. But I sit on a task force with my COO and my general counsel. He's also our legal guy. And what we do is we communicate up. We communicate up, and we also get communication down, constant communication. But we also create a task force where we're bringing in our peers in our business units, the CIO, the Chief Investment Officer in this case, because we're a trading investment firm, our CTO, our COO, our CFO, our human resource, and the head of business. And we sit and we talk. What do we talk about? What meetings? Well, this is what it looks like. There's communication down, and then there's communication up. What is the communication down? Well, communication down is usually, I consider it to be a little bit more informal, where it's relationship built, where I'm getting together in their calendar or they're in my calendar. You know, it's the beginning of the year, at the end of last year, and we're talking about what is your vision? What is your mission? What is your goal? What is your strategy in your specific business units? And that's the communication I'm getting. And I'm getting also scheduled or non-scheduled, where I'm getting things like their, what's their pain points? What are some of the things that they're focused on? And so on and so forth. And then we have the communication up. For the sake of time, I'm going to move a little faster. And the communication up is just as important. It's what I'm communicating up to the board, to those who are actually responsible for aligning or providing the budgets that I need to accomplish the goals that I'm accomplishing. We all know about KPIs and KRIs. What aligns? What is it that feeds in to your KRIs and KPIs? Well, it's your cybersecurity program initiatives, things like what you're communicating to the cybersecurity task force that's specific to the business units. When you're sitting at a board meeting or a leadership meeting, you never want to be known as the guy who says no to everything. You don't want to be known as the guy who has an obstacle for me to achieve my goal. So a lot of the conversations that one wants to have prior to that meeting is understanding what are they trying to accomplish, and then trying to communicate how we are going to help your initiative by protecting it or helping it, risk, or in some cases, reduce your cost or even help you make more money with what you're trying to accomplish. The other things that you're communicating up is your annual risk assessment, pen tests, assessments, your risks. You're communicating things like user awareness training, your KPIs, your results. You're communicating up your incident response program and your, if you have had any breaches, how you were able to have forensics and post-incident lessons learned to your organization. I have a question for you. In 2025, this is the interactive part. I have 3 books. 2025, they're saying that the budgets that is approved for cybersecurity is grown not up to 212 billion. It's actually 212 billion increase. Does anybody know what percentage of that is for 2025 compared to 2024? What percentage of increase are the budgets that are projected? This is from Gartner for 2025. What's that? 40%. Anybody else? 32? Okay. What'd you say? 100%. A little bit lower. Then everybody's too high. 30%, 20%, a little closer. 15. Who said 15? Okay. Okay, you can come here and let's give a round of applause Okay, you get to choose one of these books. I think I know which one you're going to choose. It is 15%. So what does this mean for you? So it means that whatever amount of budget you were receiving last year, you should be getting 15% more for the year 2025. Okay, that's the standard budget increase for 2025 according to Gartner. So what's the skill sets? I wrote my recent CBT, computer-based training, under soft skills. And I believe that we need to empower our business employees to grow. Yes, they're passionate about technical acumen. But as leaders, we have to be focused on their soft skills, the ability for them to be able to grow in other areas that they might not be comfortable in. Well, cybersecurity soft skills around strategic alignment, I submit to you governance alignment, helping them understand some of the previous slides that I talked about. What is the mission? What is the vision? What's the goal? What's the strategy of other business units? One thing I do with my team is I ask my other business units if I can have my team members attend their weekly, monthly meetings, and then they come back and they talk to us about what the business units are doing. This way it gives them the ability to understand the projections and then also them teaching my organization. The other one is the stakeholders, understanding who is our customers. Business collaboration, the ability to for your business unit to be able to collaborate, embedded in different projects before it's actually deployed, right? So having your organization in the feasibility studies, in project management, planning, designing, having your business units, your members, gives them that ability, and they have to grow in those soft skills to be able to maximize that for you. Let's talk a little bit about trust. Trust is, we all know the buzzword zero trust, right? I want to flip a little bit the concept of zero trust, okay? Integrity plus trust helps you meet your regulatory systems, meaning ability to comply or have compliance with what you're regulated. Earning trust. So we know about the people, process, technology. And your regulatory framework evolves around those 3 points. When you go to your compliance, they're not just focused on your technology, they're focused on regulating the people aspect and the process that's being done within each organization. You know, you could do the mapping of every organization in terms of their process. I did that, for example, in my organization, we have traders. And we started off from the onboarding of OMSs, which order management systems. For example, Bloomberg is an order management system. And we talked about how do you onboard from bringing the systems on board, training the traders, what each trader does, how they function with that order management system, what do they do, what kind of access they need for each particular function. Some have access to actually dollars and cents that they can trade. Others are trading on behalf of customers. So there's a whole life cycle, and we built a flow chart around the process, and then we talked about what the risk, where is the risk, and then where is it that we are regulated in each specific spot. And obviously you can imagine where when we talk about zero trust, regulatory systems, we have to demonstrate that the company has the integrity. For example, in our case, there is no insider trading. There is no market moving within our organization. There is no monies moving without the approvals of certain individuals. So we believe in programs or systems like least privilege to build zero trust environment where you're implementing and you're gaining trust to create that zero trust within your organization. Integrity plus trust brings the adherence to regulatory systems. What are some of the regulatory systems that you've seen? Well, legal. There are certain things that are what we call statutory, that they're legally binding, that your organization, if they breach, somebody is actually going to get fined or somebody could actually go to jail. There are laws out there that fall into that category. So those become the higher risk profile in the trust barometer. When you're looking at a legal hierarchy, there are things like constitution, there are things like statutes, legislation, regulations, procedures, and codes of conduct. That's the hierarchy in the legal. Those who are lawyers or law background, they understand that there's a hierarchy in how you adhere to the laws that you follow. So these are some of the laws that you actually have what's called legally binding. But there are certain things that are not legally binding. For example, there's guidelines, there's instructions, there's standards, best practices. These are good to have, these are important, but they're not necessarily legal binding. Now, that doesn't mean we don't need to follow them, but that means we need to make sure we're putting them in the right priority when we're building a trust model in how we implement our regulatory systems through cybersecurity. But then you have things that are maybe, things like international laws, like GRDP, maybe, depending on what you're doing. DORA, that just came out, which is something that's being implemented, or enforced, I should say, January 17th. Was implemented 2 years ago, but it's just being enforced. Well, it depends if your clients are part of the EU. Then there's contextualized. But as professionals, we have to understand where we fall within that. But when it comes to the trust side, we want to make sure, which was mentioned earlier, we're not doing it for compliance sake, we're doing it for security sake. If you're secure, you'll filter to the compliance side, but it doesn't always filter the backward side. Being compliant doesn't necessarily mean you're secure. And so we have to keep that in mind as well. Looking at some of the laws that just came up, we had in 2021, we had an executive order. In 2022, there was the CIRCA. 2023, we had the Disclosure Act. And 2025, which is DORCA. These are some of the things that are coming up. And that we need to make sure that we have in our mindset as we're communicating and reporting our controls to build that trust, right? And these are some of the reporting mechanisms that you want to do with your compliance. Cybersecurity program, your annual risk audits, your IAM audits, your vendor or third-party risk, your phishing tests. All these fall into how you communicate to your compliance side, so you're building that trust. Soft skills around this, I would say understanding legally binding within your organization is an important soft skill. I would venture to say that many of people in your organization don't necessarily understand what's legally binding, what's not legally binding, and they're trying to enforce something that's best practice as if it's legally binding, but they have to understand there's differences. You have to build in compliance behavior, that you can't enforce something that you are not adhering to, right? That we need to exhibit compliance behavior, that we need to make sure we're following in order for us to hold other departments. And then ethical principles. I consider this an important piece because this is an important piece because a lot of times the ethical portion is not those pieces that are written down. Things that no one sees, what you do when no one knows. And I am a believer that if we create an atmosphere where people are conscious about ethical behavior, not only do you gain trust, but you also gain benefits in a lot of the other areas that are written standard operating procedures. The written portion will be guided by your ethical, your barometer in how you do things. But I submit to you, those skills need to be trained not only for yourself, but also for your organization. Stability. Lastly, I think I got about 5 more minutes, and then we'll go into QA. Availability and stability, operational excellence. We cannot have a seat at the table if we are not helping the organization be stable. Through our security, yes, part of security is to deliver that A, the availability. Availability is the two sides of the coin. Availability is not to give somebody access that they shouldn't have. It should not be available to that group, to that individual, to that company. So availability is closed. But it's also the ability to give availability to when they need it. So it's a two sides of the coin of availability. But how you're able to do that, that communicates the stability of your organization. And we all know from different models, frameworks, best practices like ITIL, where we talk about operational excellence, or COBIT, or NIST. These are frameworks that help you achieve operational excellence. Well, I'm here to submit to you that the CIA triad, you have security, organization strategy, integrity, which helps you with trust, build your regulatory systems, where your availability is where you have stability, but you want to bring operational excellence. That's the communication for the business units. They're not going to understand availability. Yes, and everything needs to be available, yes. Yes, we need to have stability, but what they do understand is operational excellence. Okay, what they do understand is the ability for them to deliver their product, their services, with excellence in operations. And this is a framework. There's Center of Excellence. Many frameworks out there that you can follow. And again, one of the things that I want to put before you is practically, from a cybersecurity perspective, is having a great business continuity plan, right? This is all about the ability to operate no matter what the event is, no matter if it's a physical event or a cyber event. And high availability, we all know this, right? The ability to have active, where you're 100% high availability, or active-passive, depending on the cost model. But business continuity plan feeds into that operational excellence. When you're trying to go into your board, when you're talking to your business unit partners, when you're talking about aligning, this is where business continuity comes into play. Operational excellence is the ability for us to withstand no matter what the event. We'll talk a little bit about the events that happen. The other one is DR, right? Disaster recovery plan. And we all know, depending on what mission critical system, right? We can't, one of the conversations I always have when I get in the elevator and the CEO gets in the elevator with me, 2 questions. Are we protected? And am I going to be able to resist a ransomware or a cybersecurity attack or a natural disaster? And I say, our mission critical systems are protected based on our risk profile, right? And so there are risk profiles that we all know, the BIA plan, business impact analysis. But, depending on that impact, you have what we call cold site. This is usually where it's a redundant location, but you usually try to bring that up where it's not necessarily real time, right? You're up within a week, days or weeks, right? But the budget is appropriate depending on the specific systems. Then you have warm site. Again, not new to everybody here, but as you're explaining to your business units, it's a secondary site, which is the equipment is already in location, your connectivity is already at the location, and you're coming up not weeks or days, but hours, right? Your hours, maximum a day, right, for a warm site. And then a hot site is where you're within hours, right? That's really where the expectation, where if something goes down, I'm up within hours. And that is where equipment is already at the site, Connectivity is at the site. It's active or active before failover. An outage is within hours or seconds, if you will. But at this juncture, we need to think about the different events that are happening. This is just a mapping from the climate beyond. We're getting more and more extreme events, as we know just what happened in California, as I was talking to some of you guys. It's tragic, and we have to plan ahead. It's only getting worse. And so when we think about these events that are happening, we got to think about the top 5 cybersecurity threats trends in 2025. AI-driven cybersecurity attacks. That's what is in front of mind or predictions for 2025. Quantum computing threats. Not just the ability of insider threats, but actually where threat actors are using machine learning to initiate threats. Supply chain vulnerabilities, increasing sophisticated social engineering attacks. Many of you have probably been to different conferences where they talked about threat actors, nation states, actually interviewing for companies to get hired, and then they will work for a month or two, get the information, quit, and then use that against your organization, which is being done by some of the nation states as we speak. And so they're able to launch sophisticated engineering attacks with some of that information that they will sell. And then obviously evolving ransomware attacks or tactics. These are some of the top 2025 threats and trends that we need to make sure we are keeping in forefront. And as we close out, what are some of the soft skills that we need to be aligning our skill sets within our organization? I think about predictive analytics, the ability to use trend data, not just to give you information or for KPIs, but also to predict what's going to come so that you can mitigate. It's a skill set. Technical practicum, making sure you're allowing your organization to get those certifications. You yourself, one of the things that I'm doing myself is I'm getting my legal acronym. It's a jurisprudence degree from DePaul University, because I want to understand a little bit more of the regulatory compliance side of the legal framework as we are regulating. So just always gaming up and professionally developing yourself and your team. And lastly, having a resilience response mindset. The ability for our organization to protect itself, detect, respond, and recover in a mindset that keeps your organization running. Thank you, and I'm open for questions. Do we have any questions, please? If not, hope you guys enjoyed your lunch, and hopefully I won a little bit of the competition between the food and the presentation. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the day.